There is a crop that breaks almost every rule of modern farming. It grows where other food plants fail. It survives winters that kill potatoes. It spreads underground and comes back every single year. You plant it once, and then it keeps returning. No replanting, no seed purchases, no irrigation systems. For centuries, entire communities relied on it as a dependable source of food. It fed villages, it fed armies, and in the worst moments of famine, it kept people alive when everything else had failed. Then something strange happened. The crop didn't disappear because it stopped working. It disappeared because it didn't fit the world that came after. This is the story of a plant that survived droughts, wars, and collapsing food systems, and somehow ended up forgotten in the margins of history. So why don't you know about it? The plant has several names: Jerusalem artichoke, sunchoke, Helianthus tuberosus. It is not an artichoke, and it has nothing to do with Jerusalem. It is a perennial sunflower, which means it doesn't die after one season. Every autumn, the plant stores its energy underground in a cluster of knobbly tubers. Every spring, new stalks rise again from the same place. No replanting, no seed purchases, no irrigation required. The stems can grow 8 to 10 feet tall, crowned with bright yellow flowers that turn slowly with the sun. But the real harvest is hidden below the soil. Those underground tubers, white, gold, sometimes purple, are packed with stored energy. Not starch like a potato, something rarer, a fiber called inulin. In good conditions, 1 acre of sunchokes can produce more food energy than wheat, more than corn in cold climates, and often more than potatoes in poor soil. And it does this in land that commercial agriculture would normally abandon. You are looking at one of the most productive perennial food plants on Earth, which raises a strange question. If a crop can grow like this, why did the world stop growing it? The story begins long before European ships ever reached North America. Across the eastern woodlands and the Great Plains, indigenous nations had already known this plant for generations. To many of them, it was more than food. The Iroquois told a story. When the Earth Mother died, giving life to the first people, plants began to grow where her body touched the ground. Among them was the sunchoke, a crop born from sacrifice, a crop that always returns. Communities from the Atlantic coast to the Great Plains planted it once and harvested it for years. Underground, the plant spread through rhizomes, thin runners moving quietly through the soil like veins. One small patch could grow into a field, and that field could feed a village. The tubers were eaten raw, crisp like water chestnuts, roasted in fire pits, or dried and ground into flour that could last through the winter. This was not a rare delicacy. It was daily food. Then, in 1605, a French explorer named Samuel de Champlain arrived along the coast of what would later become Massachusetts. The Algonquin people welcomed him with a meal. Among the dishes was a strange root, knobbly, earthy, sweet. Champlain tasted it and immediately recognized something familiar. In his journals, he wrote that it reminded him of the artichokes of Europe. He filled the hold of his ship with the tubers and carried them back across the Atlantic. At the time, Europe was struggling to feed itself. Soils were exhausted. Famines appeared every few years. The potato had only recently arrived, and many people feared it, believing it caused disease. But this new root spread quickly. In France, it was called topinambour. In Italy, farmers called it girasole, meaning sunflower. Over time, that word twisted in English until it became Jerusalem. The name stayed, even though the plant was neither an artichoke nor from Jerusalem. Across Europe, it began feeding peasants, livestock, and eventually even royal kitchens. And the method of growing it was simple. Plant a piece in spring, harvest in autumn, leave fragments in the ground, and the following year, the field grows back on its own. In the winter of 1805, the Lewis and Clark expedition was running out of time. They were deep in the Dakotas. Supplies were gone. The cold was brutal. The men were weakening. Sacagawea knew where to look. Beneath the frozen ground, field mice had built winter caches, small underground chambers filled with stored food. Inside them were thousands of sunchoke tubers. She dug them out of the soil, roasted them over fire, and fed the expedition. The men survived. Long before scientists studied the plant, native communities already understood what it could do. Decades later, agricultural yield studies confirmed it. An acre of sunchokes could produce the equivalent of 64,000 calories of food energy without irrigation. Potatoes, even under ideal conditions with irrigation, produced around 53,000. This was not a niche crop. It was survival infrastructure. Then war arrived. World War I. Germany was trapped behind an Allied naval blockade. Food imports stopped. The winter of 1916 became known as the turnip winter. Potatoes failed. People were left eating livestock feed. But sunchokes, growing quietly in forgotten fields, fed families who had nothing else. They could not be blockaded. They could not be confiscated. They were already underground. World War II was worse. In 1940, Nazi forces seized nearly 80% of France's food supply. Potatoes went to German soldiers. French families survived on what remained, rutabagas and topinambur. For 4 years, millions ate them, not because they wanted to, because everything else was gone. Then came the hunger winter. The Netherlands, 1944. Food shipments stopped. Fuel ran out. The ground froze solid. More than 22,000 people died of starvation. Emergency government cookbooks listed anything that could be eaten. Wild plants, tulip bulbs, and sunchokes. Mothers dug through frozen soil with their bare hands, searching for tubers. Again and again, the same thing happened. When every organized food system collapsed, the sunchoke was already waiting in the ground. When the wars finally ended, people did not celebrate the sunchoke. They rejected it. Across Europe, an entire generation associated the plant with occupation, hunger, and the worst years they had ever lived. For many families, the taste of topinambur meant desperation. So when normal food returned, they stopped cooking it. Cookbooks removed it. Markets stopped selling it. And slowly, the vegetable disappeared from everyday life. But something else was changing at the same time. Agriculture itself was being rebuilt around a new model. Fields were becoming larger. Machines were replacing farm labor. Food had to move through warehouses, trucks, and global supply chains. That meant crops had to follow very specific rules. They needed to grow uniformly, ripen at the same time, survive mechanical harvesting, and store for months without spoiling. The sunchoke failed almost every one of those tests. Its tubers grow in irregular shapes and sizes, some large, some tiny. They mature at different times underground. Standard potato harvesters often leave half the crop in the soil, tangled in roots or too small for the machines to catch. Even after harvest, another problem appears. Sunchokes spoil faster than potatoes. Warehouses built for long storage cannot hold them for months. Then there is the strange biological quirk that gave them their infamous nickname. Sunchokes are rich in inulin, a powerful prebiotic fiber. For people whose gut bacteria are not used to it, eating large amounts can cause serious digestive discomfort. Over time, the plant gained an unfortunate nickname, artichoke. Industrial food systems have very little patience for adaptation. They prefer crops that deliver predictable yields, stable storage, and uniform harvests. The sunchoke offered none of that, so it slowly fell out of the system. Not banned, not outlawed, just quietly abandoned by a food system that didn't know what to do with it. But the plant itself never disappeared. It kept growing where it always had, in roadside ditches, along fence lines, at the edges of forgotten farms, a perennial crop that refused to die, waiting for someone to notice it again. What industrial agriculture walked away from turns out to be one of the most nutritionally interesting foods hiding in plain sight. A 100-gram serving of sunchoke contains about 73 calories and 2 grams of protein. But the minerals are where it becomes unusual. 29 milligrams of potassium, more than a banana, iron, copper, magnesium, B vitamins quietly supporting metabolism, muscle function, and nerve signals. That alone would make it a useful food. But that it isn't the real headline. The real story is a compound called inulin. Sunchokes are one of the richest natural sources of inulin in the entire plant kingdom, sometimes 50 to 60% of their dry weight. And that changes how this food behaves inside the body. Most carbohydrates break down quickly in the stomach and small intestine. Inulin does not. It passes through your digestive system, almost untouched until it reaches the colon. And there, something important happens. Beneficial bacteria, especially bifidobacteria, begin feeding on it. As they do, they multiply, and as they multiply, they produce short-chain fatty acids that help lower gut acidity, crowd out harmful microbes, and improve how the body absorbs minerals like calcium and magnesium. The effects are measurable. Regular inulin intake has been linked to improved digestion, stronger immune response, and a reduced risk of certain colon diseases. And unlike potatoes, which cause rapid spikes in blood sugar, sunchokes behave very differently. The inulin converts slowly into fructose, releasing energy gradually instead of all at once. In the 1980s, some diabetic patients who added sunchokes to their diet reported cutting their insulin needs dramatically. Folk knowledge that modern research later began to confirm. But the plant doesn't just change what happens inside the body, it changes what happens in the soil. Sunchokes are perennial. They do not require yearly ploughing, which means less topsoil erosion. Their deep root systems push through compacted ground, slowly opening up soil that other crops struggle to survive in. They tolerate drought. They survive winters down to -30 degrees Celsius. This is not a crop designed for perfect farmland. It is a crop designed for the moments when perfect farmland no longer exists. The rediscovery did not begin on a large farm. It began in a warehouse. In the 1960s, a California produce wholesaler named Frida Kaplan noticed something strange. Crates of knobbly tubers were sitting untouched. Customers ignored them. The name was the problem. Jerusalem artichoke sounded confusing. It wasn't from Jerusalem, and it wasn't an artichoke. So she changed the name. She called them sunchokes. Then she did something simple. She packaged them in small 1-pound bags and added recipe cards. Within months, sales jumped more than 600%. Chefs began experimenting. Raw, the flavor was nutty and crisp. Roasted, the texture turned soft and creamy. By the 1970s, sunchoke soup was appearing on menus in San Francisco restaurants. Then, permaculture designers discovered the plant. To them, the sunchoke looked almost perfect. Plant it once, harvest every year. No fertilizer, no irrigation, food, biomass, and soil repair from the same plant. Today, scientists studying climate-resilient agriculture are circling back to it as well, because the conditions modern crops were designed for are beginning to change. Rainfall is becoming unpredictable, heat waves are longer, droughts are more common, and in regions where wheat and corn are struggling, researchers are looking again at perennial crops that can tolerate extremes. Across parts of North America and Europe, small farms are growing them again, not as a novelty, but as a practical response to a world where stability is no longer guaranteed. History reveals a simple pattern. Whenever the systems people built around food collapsed, blockades, occupations, droughts, famines, the sunchoke was already waiting underground. It did not need warehouses. It did not need fertilizer. It did not need supply chains. It simply kept growing, and the people who remembered where to dig survived. That knowledge never completely disappeared. It still exists in small places most people walk past every day, in wild patches along roadsides, in forgotten corners of old farms, and sometimes in backyard gardens. Because the way to grow this plant is almost absurdly simple. Plant a few tubers in autumn. By spring, they multiply. 3 tubers in the ground can become 30. No special tools, no purchased seed, no chemical inputs, just soil and time. The sunchoke never truly vanished. It is still out there, still spreading underground, still producing food. We didn't lose the plant, we simply stopped looking for it. But the soil never forgot. And now you know where to look.